What if I told you there's a science fiction series with one of the most philosophically explosive premises ever put to paper? A soldier who dies, gets rebuilt with every memory intact, and just does it again, across 24 books and an entire galaxy. And that premise produces almost no genuine insight into what it means to be human. Because that's exactly what happened with B.V. Larson's Undying Mercenaries. And here's the thing. That failure is one of the most instructive things I've encountered in years of reading genre fiction. Sometimes you learn more from the wreck than from the destination. We're living through a strange golden age of genre fiction. The indie publishing revolution has given us thousands of new voices: military sci-fi, space opera, progression fantasy. Authors who'd have languished in query letter purgatory now reach millions of readers directly. That's genuinely exciting. But it also gave us something else: the rapid release machine. Authors pumping out book after book, sometimes dozens in a series, optimizing for volume the way a factory optimizes for throughput. B.V. Larson has written over 50 books. 50. That number is going to matter a lot as we dig into this. So here's the Undying Mercenaries premise, because I want you to feel the weight of what gets abandoned. In the far future, Earth survives alien conquest by becoming a mercenary world. We fight other species' wars for the right to exist. When soldiers die, they get revived through biological fabrication. Every memory preserved. Every trauma, every scar, every relationship carried forward intact. James McGill is one of these soldiers, dying and reviving repeatedly across dozens of campaigns. On paper, this is the setup for one of the deepest character studies in the history of the genre. For comparison, let's look at what good military sci-fi actually does, because we need a baseline. Marco Clue's Frontline series develops its protagonist in exactly the ways this premise demands. Andrew Grayson starts as a desperate kid from the welfare tenements and becomes something genuinely different. His worldview shifts, his relationships carry weight, each book builds on the last. That's the standard. That's what the genre is capable of at its best. Now hold that image in your mind, because we're about to talk about what happens when an author has every reason to do that, and chooses not to. Here's what should happen when a character dies and revives with full memory over and over again. The philosophy kicks in immediately. Who are you exactly after the 5th death? After the 15th? This is the ship of Theseus applied to human consciousness in the most visceral possible way. Every revival should chip something away or add something new. The accumulated weight of dying is not nothing. It's not a minor detail. It is the story. The premise doesn't just support that exploration, it demands it. Think about what accumulated trauma does to people in real life. Now imagine dying violently, being reassembled from a biological template, waking up with the knowledge that you have died before, and doing that a dozen times. Does it make you fearless or reckless? Do you form relationships differently when death is just a temporary interruption? Does your moral framework shift when consequences can technically be reset? These aren't abstract philosophy seminar questions. These are the questions the premise is physically screaming at the author to explore, and McGill never once sits with any of them. And here's the part that's genuinely maddening. In book 21, there's apparently a scene where a character named Graves sits McGill down and reflects on the small ways each revival subtly changes you. By accounts of readers who made it that far, it's one of the only genuinely thoughtful moments in the entire series. One conversation. After 20 books of pure setup, that single scene is the novel the whole series should have been exploring from page 1. It's proof the author knew what the premise contained and filed it away as an afterthought. The literary term for what McGill is a static character. He doesn't arc. He doesn't change. He begins book 1 as a roguish, self-serving, frankly unlikable soldier, and ends book 24 as exactly the same person. Now, static characters can be a deliberate artistic choice. Holden Caulfield's refusal to change is itself the story of Catcher in the Rye. The stasis is the point. But McGill isn't static in a meaningful way. He's static the way a cardboard cutout is static. There's no interiority behind the flatness. There's also what I'd call the competent idiot problem. McGill constantly does stupid, reckless, morally indefensible things, but the plot rewards him anyway. The technical term is plot armor, but the deeper issue is this. When a character suffers no real consequences for their decisions, when incompetence and competence produce identical outcomes, The author is sending a message whether they intend to or not. The message is, choices don't matter here. And when choices don't matter, stakes don't exist. And when stakes don't exist, you don't have a story, you have events. Character likability is complicated. I want to be precise here. We love morally complex protagonists. Walter White is genuinely awful and one of the great characters in modern storytelling, but we understand him. We see the internal logic of each decision. We feel the weight of each choice degrading him. That's the crucial difference. McGill offers none of that interiority. He just does things, and women inexplicably want him, and the plot inexplicably resolves in his favor. The reader has no handhold on him. There's nothing to push against, which means there's nothing to care about. What we're really describing is genre fiction running on autopilot. The formula becomes visible from orbit: inciting incident, deployment, alien conflict, resolution, full reset back to the shack in Georgia. 24 times. This is the serialized fiction equivalent of a procedural TV show with no season arc, every episode ending with the status quo perfectly restored, no character carrying any scar from what just happened. There's a reason prestige television abandoned that model. Audiences want cumulative storytelling. We want the show to remember what happened. We want the weight to add up. Let's talk about Groundhog Day for a moment, because it's the perfect counterpoint to everything we've just described. Phil Connors also gets infinite retries. He also starts as a genuinely unlikable person, arrogant, selfish, completely checked out from genuine human connection. But the entire film is about what those retries do to a human soul over time. He cycles through nihilism, hedonism, despair, and eventually, slowly, painfully, growth. The reset is the mechanism of change, not an escape from it. That single structural choice is what separates profound fiction from forgettable fiction. B.V. Larson never made it. Or consider Claire North's The First 15 Lives of Harry August, a novel about a man who lives his entire life, dies, and is reborn at the beginning with every memory intact. It's a masterclass in asking exactly the questions Undying Mercenaries abandons. What does the accumulation of lifetimes do to your ethics, to your capacity for love? Does wisdom compound, or does it curdle into something darker? The novel gets genuinely strange and uncomfortable in the best possible way. That discomfort is the point. It's what the premise is actually for. Even video games understand this better than Undying Mercenaries does, and I mean that without a hint of condescension toward the medium. Hades, the roguelike from Supergiant Games, uses death and revival as its actual storytelling engine. Every run, every death advances something. The protagonist learns new things about his family, his world, himself. Death is never a reset. Death is a revelation. A video game figured out in an interactive medium what 24 novels couldn't. When a game beats you at your own premise, you have to reckon with that. Now I want to zoom out and sit with the economics of this for a moment, because I think it actually matters for how we read and what we choose. Rapid release publishing is a deliberate commercial strategy. Some indie authors release a new book every 4 to 6 weeks. The model structurally incentivizes volume over depth. More books means more product in the algorithm, more visibility, more subscription reads. The author may not be writing carelessly because they don't care about craft. They may be writing carelessly because the market has decided that carelessness is fine. That's worth thinking about next time you hit download. But here's the moment that genuinely stopped me, and I bet you didn't see this coming. The reader who spent 24 books with James McGill, the person who wrote that scathing, funny, exhausted review, actually had a character arc. A real one. They started with optimism, hit frustration, pushed through stubborn sunk-cost logic, arrived at reflection. And at the end, they wrote something quietly profound. I don't know who's the bigger idiot, McGill or myself. That is self-awareness. That is the kind of honest interiority that McGill never once demonstrates across 24 novels. The reader outgrew the book. The book never grew at all. Think about what that actually means. Someone engaging with aggressively mediocre fiction still managed to extract genuine meaning from it, not from the text itself, but from the experience of reading it. They learned something real about their own stubbornness, about sunk cost, about momentum, and the refusal to stop. The book didn't provide a character arc. The reader brought their own. And that instinct, that need to find meaning and growth even in frustration, is exactly the human quality the fiction itself kept refusing to explore. And that brings us to the deepest truth about what great fiction is actually supposed to do. It doesn't just give you plot. It doesn't just give you world building or action sequences or entertaining aliens. It gives you a mirror. It creates conditions for self-reflection. It hands you a character navigating pressure and lets you discover what you would do, what you believe, who you actually are. Bad fiction fails at this. It gives you plot and nothing else. But the human appetite for that reflective experience is so persistent, so fundamental, that this reader found it anyway, in the friction of reading something frustrating. So here's the synthesis. Consequence is the engine of meaning in fiction, not action, not world building, not even prose style, though that matters too. Consequence. When choices accumulate, when the past shapes the present and the present shapes who the character becomes, we recognize something true about being alive. Strip that away and you have an expensive way to kill time. The revival premise in Undying Mercenaries was a perfect metaphor for a question we all live with. Do we actually change, or do we just accumulate experiences while remaining fundamentally the same? That is a profound question. McGill's answer, by default, by absence, is that nothing changes, nothing matters, and that's fine. That's not fiction. That's a lullaby. The next time you pick up a book, especially one in a long series, ask yourself early on whether the choices are accumulating, whether the character at the end of this volume will carry something from its pages. That's the test. Not whether the plot moves fast, or the action is visceral, or the world building is detailed. Whether the character's past is allowed to become their present. The books that stay with you, the ones that genuinely change how you see things, are almost always the ones that answered yes to that question. That's the promise good fiction makes. Demand it be kept. If this changed how you think about what separates fiction that lingers from fiction that evaporates, you're going to love our deep dive into All You Need Is Kill, the novel that became Edge of Tomorrow, and exactly how Hiroshi Sakurazaka uses the death end revival loop not as an escape from consequence, but as the most brutal consequence imaginable. It's everything Undying Mercenaries refuse to be, and we'll show you why, scene by scene. We'll see you there.